of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, and welcome to the New York State's 5th Senate District Candidates Night, sponsored by the League of Women Voters. My name is Michelle Lamberti, and I will serve as your moderator this evening. I represent the League of Women Voters, and I am not from the Senate District. The League of Women Voters promotes civic responsibility through voter education, such as tonight's forum. For 250 years, informed and active citizens have been a linchpin of our democracy. The League is nonpartisan and does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. Throughout our history, the League has provided opportunities for candidates seeking public office to take their case directly to voters. We applaud you for taking the time to learn about these candidates. Before we begin, a few words about voting. In New York State, there are 3 ways that you can vote in this November general election: via absentee ballot, during the new early voting period, which is Saturday, October 24th, through Sunday, November 1st, at any Nassau or Suffolk County early polling site, and on Election Day, which is Tuesday, November 3rd, from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. at your assigned polling place. We suggest you make a plan to vote. Absentee ballots must be postmarked by November 3rd, or can be dropped off at a polling site or the County Board of Elections by 9 p.m. on November 3rd, which is Election Day. Information about voting and the races in your district are available on the League's voting website, vote411.org. And I see the candidates have now turned their cameras on. So the candidates for New York State's 5th Senate District are Senator James Gaughran, Councilman Ed Smyth, and Ms. Barbara Wagner, who may be joining us a little bit later this evening. The candidates have agreed to 13 rules for this forum. I will read them briefly. The moderator will be a member of the League of Women Voters from outside the district. I reside in Senate District 7. The moderator has pulled a straw to determine the order of speaking. Each candidate will be allowed 3 minutes for an opening statement. After all candidates have spoken, the moderator will open the meeting with questions from the audience, submitted electronically either before or during the forum. Electronic addresses for questions have been publicized with the forum and are available on the League website. The moderator will instruct the audience to confine each question to the issues in the campaign and to take no more than 1 minute when asking. The moderator is the arbiter of whether questions are appropriate, repetitive, or abusive. Questions may be addressed to a specific individual or to the candidates in general, although all candidates will be given an opportunity to answer any question addressed to a specific individual. Each candidate is given 1.5 minutes to answer each question. At the moderator's discretion, time for a response may be reduced as long as it is the same for everyone. There will be no rebuttal. The moderator will attempt to rotate the order of speaking for each question. A League member is acting as timekeeper. 1/2 minute from the end of any given time period, the timekeeper will warn the speaker by a prearranged signal. When the time is up, the speaker will be allowed to finish the sentence. Repeatedly speaking past the deadline may result in a candidate being muted. Candidates will have 2 minutes for a closing statement and will speak in the same order as the opening statement. Since the purpose of the meeting is to determine the candidate's views, no substitute speakers will be allowed to appear should a candidate be unable to attend. The use of props, charts, or visuals, and the distribution of campaign literature is prohibited. In accordance with League policy, audio or video recordings by authorized members of the media will be permitted only if agreed upon by all candidates present. The League maintains the right to record the forum and publish it on our League-controlled electronic pages. No other recording will be allowed. No partial transcript or recording may be published without written permission from the League. These are the rules for this forum. This candidates forum is being recorded and will be available in 24 hours on our League website and YouTube. Voters within the district have submitted questions before the start of tonight's forum and can provide questions in the links provided. And as per the straw poll, tonight Ms. Wagner was slated to go first. She is not here at the moment, so we will begin with Senator Gaughran.
Thank you very much. First, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for setting this up. I know it's probably been a lot more difficult to do this than the normal routine when we're all together in a school or a hall someplace, because I know the technology sometimes there are lots of issues. So congratulations for that. Thank you. And Councilman Smith, thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to this. I'm Jim Gaughran. I have the honor of representing the 5th Senatorial District. Prior to that, I served in public office many years ago as a Huntington Town Councilman, as well as a member of the Suffolk County Legislature. And my profession is I'm an attorney. I'm very proud of the record and what I have accomplished during my almost 2 years now as a state senator. One of my biggest achievements is the permanent property tax cap. The 2% cap is now permanent in New York State. It wasn't, it was sunsetting all the time, and now I believe the taxpayers of Long Island, the taxpayers of the state, the property taxpayers, now have the assurances that law will move forward, because property taxes is obviously one of our biggest issues that we're facing on Long Island. Very proud of some of the reforms that were passed in Albany. We started with voting reforms, early voting, no excuse absentee ballot, which will fully go into effect after the next session since it's a constitutional amendment, and a variety of other changes. Voted for sensible legislation to protect us from unnecessary gun violence, including the red flag law, which I'm a proud co-sponsor of, which basically says that a gun will be taken away from somebody who does not have the mental capacity to have it, based on a judge after due process. Much in the environment, the Climate and Community Protection Act, the strongest law dealing with climate change in the country. Myself, I wrote a law that the governor signed that now allows water districts, public water entities, to sue polluters who have created all sorts of problems. And as you know, we have a sole source aquifer which we live upon. I'm very proud that we codified the principles of Roe v. Wade, which I think it's important to keep that law in New York, especially on the horizon. It looks like we may have a Supreme Court that is going to look to take the reproductive rights of women away from them. And there are many criminal justice reforms that I was also happy to vote for. I serve as chair of the local government committee, which I'm honored to do, putting me in charge of legislation dealing with all towns, villages, counties, and small cities in the state. But this last year started out fine, but then COVID hit, and we had to deal with a lot of very serious issues. My office has been inundated with helping people get on unemployment. Over probably 1,500 people we helped get on unemployment. We help people get into the hospitals, into nursing homes, and some tough decisions have had to be made throughout the year. I am pleased that we have been able to flatten the curve in New York State, and I hope that we can stay that way. We see some things popping up here and there. I really want our kids to all be back in the classroom remotely. They're working very hard. Some are in class, some are remote, some hybrid. It depends on the school district, and I support those decisions being made at the school district. But we got to get past COVID. We got to get back to normal, and I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. Councilman Smith?
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by thanking the League of Women Voters for putting this forum together. I echoed Senator's comments about the understanding of how difficult this is to pull off, and I applaud you for it. My name is Edmund Smith. I'm a town councilman in Huntington. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. My wife, Coriander, and I both grew up here in Huntington. We chose to raise our 4 children here. As a practicing lawyer and a former Marine Staff Sergeant, I'm very persuasive about the issues I care about. I'll work with anybody who shares my concerns, regardless of their political party. I love Long Island, but I'm concerned about my children's future here. I'm concerned about the taxes and the cost of living and the lack of new industry. I'm concerned this will drive them to more economically progressive regions of the country. Most importantly, I'm always concerned about their safety. I'm running because New York, I think, is heading in the wrong direction. I'll repeal the disastrous bail reform law. The bail system needed reform for truly low-level crimes. such as motor vehicle offenses, but no one should ever spend a night in jail for a expired registration. But the low-level crimes were a Trojan horse, which carried far more serious crimes into the bail reform bill, such as having a weapon on school grounds, burglary, possession of child pornography, stalking, selling heroin to a 13-year-old. The full list of crimes that are no longer bail eligible is truly astonishing. The judges are forced to immediately release defendants without bail, hoping that they'll return for trial. The coronavirus, what a year. It has affected all of us in every aspect of our lives. I will continue to support every reasonable precaution to ensure public health and continue to support our first responders and medical professionals. But as we move forward, I support safely reopening our economy and promoting business. I believe it's an essential role of our government to do so. I'm an unapologetic free market capitalist. I will do everything I can to attract new industries to Long Island. I will be an outspoken critic of anybody who pushes away new business from our region. For example, the Amazon headquarters debacle in Long Island City. It will be taught in political science classes for years to come as one of the greatest examples of government malpractice. The impact cannot be overstated. 25,000 executive level jobs averaging $150,000 a year, along with billions in economic activity to our region. If anyone wonders why families are leaving New York and our kids go off to college and don't return, look no farther than this fiasco. It was pure politics that killed that deal. As the son of two immigrants, my parents' top priority was my education. They often said education is no load to carry. Public schools must be a budgetary priority. The annual foundation aid to public schools was cut over the last 2 years. I ask anyone you know who serves on a school board, and they'll tell you about the unnecessary economic hardship that this has been placed on their school districts. Lastly, I believe in term limits for all politicians, no exceptions. Dog catcher to governor, every single one of us. Term limits. I don't claim to have all the answers. I'll keep an open mind, and I'll work with any reasonable person to bring common sense to Albany. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. And the first question, we'll start with Senator Gaughran. What are the most urgent issues facing New York State Senate District 5, and how would you address them?
Well, the most urgent issues is how are we going to avoid cuts to our schools, cuts to our local governments, cuts to our hospitals. When we adopted the budget this year, we had the opportunity to adopt a pessimistic budget, to adopt an optimistic budget. And we chose to adopt an optimistic budget based on the representations that we heard from Washington, that there was going to be assistance for state and local governments for our lost revenues. We cannot print money. Washington can borrow money. They can send us money. And our sales tax, our income tax is dramatically dropping. So what we need to do is to make sure that we're avoiding cuts, that we're filling any budget holes that we need, and that we're moving forward with our economy. Unfortunately, I believe unless Joe Biden is elected president, we're going to have a very difficult time, because President Trump has made it very clear that we're a blue state, doesn't want to help us. All we're asking for is just a little return on all the money we as New Yorkers have sent down. We need to get this aid from Washington. That's what I'm going to continue to really push and fight for. And then we have to make sure that we are getting all the money for our schools, for our hospitals, and then we're rebuilding our economy and moving forward in a different way. A lot of it's going to be different. Things are not going to be the same after COVID. And I have a lot of plans for that in my second term, but I see the 30-second clock is up, so thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Councilman Smith. Oh, you're muted, Councilman Smith. Let me.
Sorry about that. The host unmuted. Okay. I would say the top priority that we're facing right now in this district and across the state is the safe reopening of our economy from the quarantine restrictions that are in place. We have to get back to business. We have to do it safely. We have to figure out ways to do it. It's been certainly a challenge for everybody, but I think we can get that done. And the reason being is our economy drives the tax revenue to Albany. I don't think it's wishful thinking to wait on Washington, D.C. for anything, quite frankly. I don't think that that's a good strategy to hope Washington, D.C. comes through for us. I think we have to look at our own budget and prioritize what's in the budget. And with the money that we have that we can reliably count on coming into Albany's coffers, it's going to require us to make difficult decisions. It's not a question of looking for new taxes, but simply prioritizing where we're spending the money that we have. There are a lot of tax breaks that should be given a hard look at. I think there was $400 million in tax breaks for Hollywood producers to come in. I think that's something that should be looked at. I think the $100 million in funding for campaigns for politicians, I think is nothing but welfare for politicians, and it should be taken off the table. These are just small items, but collectively we have to show a priority towards schools and reopening the economy.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. And so the next question will start with you, which follows up on this a little bit. How would you address the looming shortfalls in New York State's budget? What cuts would you make if federal stimulus does not arrive?
Well, to go right back into what I was saying, there are some grants and loopholes that should be started with. Number one, I was just saying the public funding of political campaigns, I think, is something that should be on the table immediately and chopped. That is nothing but welfare for politicians. I don't support it at all. And I say that as somebody who's running for office with a lot less money than my opponent. I still wouldn't support public funding of campaigns. I think Hollywood is, if they want to come filming in New York, they can afford to do it themselves. We don't need to give them tax breaks to do it. But these are ways where we have to look at what's in the budget. We have to look at things that are absolutely non-essential, and we have to close them. And it's going to be painful for some industries, but right now we have to look at only absolutely essential things, because we have to get the economy going, because it's the economy that drives revenue into Albany. Simple as that. And we have to reopen. We have to do it safely, but we have to reopen our economy.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. Senator Gaughran?
Well, the vast majority, overwhelming majority of the money in the state budget, and we have over $14 billion deficit, goes to aid to our public schools, and it goes for medical costs, Medicaid, funding for hospitals, funding for nursing homes. That is where the vast majority goes. There's no campaign finance money in the budget now. That is that is something that is in the future. Yes, there is some money that goes to the film industry, but that's to try to keep them here so they don't go to other states, and we generate so much more tax revenue and jobs as a result of it. So it's going to come down to making some tough choices. My choices are going to be, number one, public education funding to our public schools, our K through 12, as well as our community colleges and state universities. That is where I would like to cut the very least, because I believe education, our kids are our future. Then we have to be very careful when we're dealing with the healthcare system. Are there other agencies we can look around in the state? Maybe some of our economic development programs. Our parks programs are kind of hard to cut, because most of that revenue comes from operating parks. There are not a lot of easy answers. I support bringing online sports betting to New York, because that would instantly create a lot of new revenue, but there are going to be some very difficult choices to be made.
Thank you, Senator. And then for the next question, you will be first, Senator Gaughran. With President Trump's recent nomination to the Supreme Court, it seems that Roe v. Wade may be overturned in the next few years. Do you support New York's Reproductive Health Act's codification of Roe v. Wade and promise to keep that law in place irrespective of what happens in the Supreme Court?
Yes, I support it, and I voted for it. And I'm glad I did, because President Trump's nominee has made it very clear in her prior public and written statements that she does not support principles of Roe v. Wade, and she will vote to repeal it. And so we are one vote away from every woman in this country losing their very basic reproductive health rights. So that's why I'm glad we codified it, and I will, if I'm reelected, make sure that it is not repealed.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. Councilman Smith.
I don't support it. I would have left the abortion law elite. I would have left it legal to 24 weeks where it was, 24 weeks of pregnancy, that is. I didn't think it needed to be expanded further through the moment of birth. I think that it's far too extreme. I would have required a medical doctor to perform an abortion and not just a healthcare professional. I think, but the abortion in New York was a settled issue at 24 weeks and should have remained there.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. And the next question will begin with for you. What do you recommend as best practice to jumpstart the New York State economy? Can you describe what other states are doing well and what you'd like to do in New York?
Well, best practices, I think it would be to leave it to the individual businesses, because every industry is going to have its own set of concerns. There's going to be a very different set of rules that should apply to, for example, a restaurant versus a electrical contractor. To reopen the economy, it's going to have to put it down on an industry by industry level to look at what works for them and what doesn't. But some of the basics, I think, the obvious stuff like wearing masks in public places, and gloves and providing hand sanitizer. The very basics is a great start, but I think it has to be left to each individual industry to come up with their own set of parameters on how to reopen their businesses, and further also give individuals the right to make decisions for themselves as to when they feel safe to go out and not, and also whether or not they feel safe to gather, for example, in a church or synagogue. And if they don't, they can make that decision for themselves and simply stay home or watch church or synagogue services on television like we're doing now, which is often available. But it's something I think we have to put back into the hands of the individual and back into the hands of the individual industry so they can tailor it to what their industry requires.
Thank you. Senator Gaughran.
Well, I've been working very closely with businesses across Long Island and throughout my district in helping them navigate some of the rules, and we've had some success in getting them back and open, and we need to open up every business as quickly but as safely as possible, because we don't want a regression. We don't want to go back to where we were in April and May. In terms of jump-starting the economy, I've actually been working with some business leaders on some legislation that I will hope to present after the election, to present for votes in January. One of the big problems we have is that your mom and pop stores have gone out of business. We have a lot of vacant space in shopping centers, office buildings. People like the remote working in many cases. So you're going to have a lot of empty stores, empty space that results in lost jobs as well as lost revenue and, quite frankly, property taxes. So what I want to do is I want to take the state's economic development money and redefine it. Go away from sort of this regional competition practice, but look exactly into how can we give this money, and speaking of Long Island, directly to help stimulate new businesses where they're going to hire people, hire local people, and create jobs. And I think we have to partner with the towns and villages as well, because some of that's going to require some changes of zoning and other land use changes.
Thank you, Senator. And this next question will be for you first. Please describe your viewpoint on bail reform.
Sure.
Does the new law require changes or reconsideration?
Well, I supported the bail reform, which, as most of you know, was part of the governor's budget, and not voting for a budget means that you're not voting for your schools, and then your property taxes are going to go up, our kids' class sizes are going to increase, and so I had to fight to make sure we got record increases for our school. And yes, the original bail proposal I felt needed to be changed, but the purpose of it, the underlying purpose, is so that people who have committed or alleged to have committed minor things, stealing backpacks, petty theft, shouldn't be sitting in jail because they can't make $250 bail for months and in some cases years. Immediately after it passed, I sponsored legislation that would restore a whole bunch of alleged crimes back into bail. Not all of them got back into the revisions, but then when we came back and passed the budget the next time, because I learned how the budget worked, I was able to convince my colleagues to restore much of what needed to be restored. And basically, it gives judges the discretion. If it's a violent crime, if it's a serious felony, they have the discretion to set bail, to use electronic monitoring. And that's their discretion. And sometimes they choose not to set bail, and sometimes they set bail and people make bail. But I would like to see further changes made, and that's something I will hope to work on in the next term.
Thanks, Senator Gaughran. Councilman Smith?
Yeah, thank you. I think the bail reform bill was ill-advised, to say the least. I think it should be repealed in its entirety and start from square one. The sentiment that it started with is the right one, and that was that bail for petty theft or petty crimes, oftentimes traffic violations, which I referred to earlier, that was the impetus for this. And as I said, nobody, as Senator Gaughran said, nobody should ever spend a night in jail for a traffic violation or stealing a backpack or anything like that. And I don't think anybody disagrees with that. The problem is that the way the bail reform bill was crafted initially, it was done so without any input from any of the district attorneys, Republican and Democrat. They were all very upset with it. The judges had no input in it. Even defense attorneys had no input into the original drafting. And it wound up being a list of crimes that judges no longer have discretion to hold defendants on. It was not anything like petty nonviolent crimes. There were some very, very serious crimes that were included in the original draft. There were some taken out, but criminally negligent homicide, for example, aggravated vehicular homicide. These were all in the original bill that was voted for. But what was left in even after the revision is pretty startling. And I would advise everybody watching, go online and find this and look at it. I mean, you have crimes that are I guess somebody would consider them nonviolent, but you have all sorts of sex offender crimes that are still left in there.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. Take your time. Thank you. And Councilman Smith, this question is for you first.
Sure.
Do you believe the groundwater contamination at the Northrop Grumman facility is being handled appropriately?
Well, groundwater contamination is it's a huge issue on Long Island. I think it could always get more funding and more research put into it and more remediation. So to say appropriately, yes, but more can always be done. And we have this problem in other areas of Long Island because whatever goes into the ground, we wind up drinking it years later. So I think we can always put more money into that and more research and more resources into the Bethpage plume.
Thanks, Councilman Smith. Senator Gaughran?
Well, the cleanup of the Bethpage plume began with Governor Cuomo several years before I took office, and I do represent part of Bethpage, and the state continues to invest tens of millions of dollars in the cleanup. But it has to be understood that that is hopefully just money that is being advanced by the state. The state is continuing to fight the federal government and Northrop Grumman to get them to pay back for the pollution that they cause. But we just couldn't sit back and wait for them to do it while the plume continued to threaten other areas. I have sponsored legislation authored that I referenced before, which now gives every water district the ability to sue polluters. The statute of limitations, which was 3 years, had so many flaws in it that it seemed to be written by the polluters. Now almost every water district, water authority are suing people who manufactured chemicals that got into the drinking water. I believe you're going to see billions of dollars being recouped. And by the way, that's money that otherwise would be paid for by the local property taxpayers in all of these districts. And we have also pumped in hundreds of millions of dollars to help deal with the groundwater issue, particularly the emerging contaminants and some of the new standards that the state has set for pollutants.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. And this question will be for you, for you to answer first. What can be done to improve access to health care, especially for children? What about the disproportionate health care provided to low-income families? What can we do to improve outcomes of not only chronic disease, but COVID-19?
Well, if Obamacare can be saved, and Joe Biden has a plan where he's going to expand it to provide much more money, and then we will take all that money in the state to make sure that there isn't any child anywhere, regardless of their income, and quite frankly, any citizen of New York that doesn't have good quality health care. As it relates to COVID, we basically have to make sure that there are no costs for COVID. In fact, my office has been battling some healthcare providers who were actually charging people exorbitant sums of money after they had COVID tests, or in some cases, in addition to the tests, there would be sort of a little bit more of an examination. Now all of a sudden, people are being charged a lot of money that they don't have in the crisis. We also have to find ways to make sure that we find additional funding so that we can have full health care for everybody.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. Councilman Smith.
Yeah, I would support similar going after insurance companies. I think that's one stop is with the insurance companies. I'll say it, I'm not a fan of insurance companies, but overcharging people they should be held accountable for that, for any kind of COVID testing. Right now, I think there's adequate access right now because nobody can be turned away from an emergency room in New York. It's illegal. It's both they'll be held responsible criminally and civilly. So nobody gets turned away for emergency health care. As far as low-income programs, I would fully support anything to make sure that children have access to health care.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. And this question will be for you first. What legislation would you propose to help increase the amount of affordable housing being built in Senate District 5?
Well, I've said it in the past that I think the best access to affordable housing is a good economy and high income jobs in the area. So stimulating the economy is the best path, and good jobs is the best path to affordable housing. We've had several projects here in Huntington that I've supported. There's been some housing projects here in Huntington that I've been an outspoken critic of because they don't have any affordable housing component to them. The Gateway Giveaway project comes to mind. But number one, affordable housing is stimulating the economy, bringing jobs so that people can afford housing. But I am not a fan of artificially interfering with the market for housing. There's so many examples I can go into where the best intentions lead to terrible outcomes, where lottery results wind up with people winning very valuable houses for very low prices when the house could have been sold at fair market and that the profit from it distributed to many, many other people rather than one lucky lottery winner.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. Senator Gaughran.
Well, like the other answers I gave, what the state can do is going to be dependent on whether or not we get changes in Washington, because I believe if we do get changes in Washington, there will be a major infrastructure program that will provide funding for localities to help develop, whether it's housing, affordable housing, economic development, infrastructure for sewers and roads to help make it work. I actually have a plan that is looking at how we're going to redevelop some areas that are basically going to be empty because of COVID. And I think we may even be looking at some shopping areas where you're never going to be able to replace the big anchor retail store. And so I think mixed use is something that we have to look to. And again, I think the state could incentivize with some funding for some of the infrastructure to help do this. It should be in conjunction with the local governments. So the local governments, whether it's the town or the village, could opt in for some of these funds. And then we really need to, I think, continue to look at the transit-oriented development that's going on Long Island, particularly for our young people. You know, many of our young people do not want to live in a single-family home like many of us are. They want a different type of lifestyle, and I think some of the transit-oriented development is working quite well.
Thank you, Senator. And this question will be you first. This past year, or 2019, the New York legislature voted to end religious exemptions for immunizations. Could you comment on this revision to the public health law that removed all exemptions except for medical exemptions for immunizations?
Yes, I did vote for that law because I believe it is very important to keep our children safe. Parents always have the medical exemption, and they will continue to have that. But a so-called religious exemption, which existed in New York law, which was really more a philosophical exemption, I just felt, and it was a, it was a vote where I met with people on lots, many different sides, but I felt that I really needed to side with the science for the protection of our children, for the protections of our faculty. And by the way, at some point, we should have, hopefully, a very safe COVID vaccine. I'm going to believe it's safe when Dr. Fauci and the scientists and everybody else believe it, and it's well tested, and they meet all the standards of all the other vaccines. But then we're probably going to have to implement that in the public schools as well, because as long as it's safe, because that's how we eradicate diseases, by everybody being vaccinated.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. Councilman Smith.
Yeah, I think the religious exemptions, well, first of all, the medical exemptions, I think that's been almost completely eliminated to begin with in New York. From what I've been hearing from a lot of people is that the medical exemptions from vaccinations has been almost completely eliminated, and that's been a problem for many people that do have serious illnesses and do have medical doctors advising them not to receive certain vaccinations. So, but religious exemptions, I think, should be a personal choice, but much more rare and treated much the same way that a conscientious objector is or was treated when it came to military service. There is a very small but a very credible group of people that have strong religious beliefs, and it should be respected. It's not going to make a huge difference. It's not going to create an outbreak anywhere. There are plenty of people that have no medical records whatsoever that are continuing to remain in schools, whether or not they have vaccinations or not. So I have a problem with the equal protection aspect of this, where certain people have had their children taken out of schools immediately and put aside when there's no real public risk. I agree with the science of it. All my children are vaccinated, but I don't like the way the government last year, what is it, June 13th, basically passed this thing instantaneously and essentially put children out of schools almost immediately. It was not handled correctly.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. And so the next question we received, and I'm going to put two together because they're a little bit along the same lines, is so a lot of the decisions that have been made around COVID have been made at the executive level in New York. So the question I'm going to ask is, do you believe wearing masks in public is a good policy? And should the Senate have any role in determining the opening or closing of New York businesses, schools, and houses of worship due to COVID? And if so, what do you think should drive those openings or phased openings and closings?
Who first?
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman Smith.
Yeah, as far as masks, do I like wearing a mask? No, I don't think anybody does, but it's a very small inconvenience to put up with in order to flatten the curve and or eventually get rid of this coronavirus. I will say flat out, I watched firsthand with the town supervisor, Lupinacci in Huntington. I tip my hat to all of the executives who were faced with very difficult decisions early on in this quarantine and coronavirus when it came to shutting down government services, shutting down facilities. It was very difficult. So I truly tip my hat to all of them, whether it's Steve Ballone in the county exec, our town supervisors, Governor Cuomo, Donald Trump. There was no playbook for this, and anybody that attacks them for the calls that they made, I think is just Monday morning quarterbacking. But with that said, I do think an after action report is warranted. I think we should look into how these things were all handled, and I think we should do that so that going forward we don't make the same mistakes again, because inevitably mistakes were made. Honest mistakes, but mistakes were made, and they should be avoided going forward if, God forbid, anything like this happens again.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. Senator Gaughran?
Everybody has to wear a mask. Everybody has to separate 6 feet, sanitize, and follow all the rules. And we did give the governor authority to take action. And basically, this is what he did, but he implemented the CDC recommendations that came down. I would hope that the legislature would not have to mandate this, that everybody will follow it and it will be done, because this should not be a political issue. But unfortunately, and I disagree to an extent with Councilman Smith, and that is President Trump did not show any leadership on this. He made it very clear that masks are an option, and then many in the Republican Party, including some of my colleagues on the Senate floor who refused to wear masks, decided that this is a political issue. It's not a political issue. It's a matter of life and death. It's a scientific fact that if you wear a face covering, you're going to protect yourself from any sort of germs, and especially the coronavirus.
Thank you. Senator Gaughran, we'll begin with you on this one. What do you see as the best way to ensure our police are as effective as possible so that our communities are safe? Would you be in favor of spending more or less on police budgets in 2021?
Well, the only police budget that we control at the state level is the New York State Police Department. So all police budgets below that are conducted by the counties, by villages. Some towns have their own police force. I do not support the concept of defunding police. And at the local level, I think it would be a mistake because defunding police would mean our 2 county police departments, for example, would have to lay off some of the most recently hired police officers who are often police classes that have more, folks who are from communities of color, and I think that's very important to really make sure that we have community policing moving forward.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. Councilman Smith?
Yeah, I support a well-funded, well-trained police department. I would not, obviously, as the senator said, we don't control at the state level. We don't control local police departments, but whenever possible, fully support the police in their funding and their training. I want well-trained, well-educated cops showing up to my door when necessary. I don't want Bubba with a 6-shooter who's not trained properly, under-equipped, showing up at an emergency situation. I want somebody who is well-educated, level-headed, well-trained, and I don't want to defund the police in any way whatsoever.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. The next question will be for you first. How would you advocate for Oyster Bay Long Island Railroad riders who are concerned about the possible discontinuation of the line due to MTA lack of revenue and reduced ridership?
This one's
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's for you first. Do you want me to repeat the question?
No, I think I have it. First of all, I think we're going to have to see where the revenue streams are, where they level out at. I have to believe that there's going to be some serious belt tightening in the MTA. I would not support shutting down the line itself. I think there might be service cuts just due to lack of demand throughout the entire system. I mean, Senator Gaughran and I would probably agree that, what used to be bread and butter politics of campaigning at train stations in the morning is not really something we do very often, or haven't done. I haven't, simply because there's very few people riding the trains right now, and that has to have a downstream effect when it comes to revenue to the train station, to the train and the MTA. But no, I would not support shutting down the Oyster Bay line, but there's going to be serious belt tightening throughout the entire system.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. Senator Gaughran?
Well, it's sort of a two-part question or answer. With COVID, we're going to have to do some extraordinary things to figure out a way that we're going to keep our entire mass transit system running, all lines, including the Oyster Bay line, which we may be seeing diminished service across, unless we again get some revenue from the federal government and we get back to ridership, because ridership is what controls most of the revenues. However, I have been working very closely from the day I took office with many business leaders in the communities on the Oyster Bay line, going all the way, at least in my district, to Glen Cove. I've met several times with the president of Long Island Railroad, and I have gotten a commitment that he is going to bring forward with a plan in using some of the additional money that we voted for in the state Senate in the budget process to try to figure out a way that we can increase ridership at the Oyster Bay line. The way you increase ridership is to provide more trains. Right now, there are very few trains, so we need more frequent trains during rush hour in particular, and that's going to help the other lines as well, because there are many people who don't travel the Oyster Bay line, drive right past their local station and go to Syosset or Hicksville, some other station, filling up the parking there. So it makes an awful lot of sense to upgrade the Oyster Bay line. Eventually, we're going to need electrification for all lines all the way out on Long Island.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. And this next question will begin with you, Senator Gaughran. What do you see as the biggest threats to Long Island water, and what will you commit to do to build consensus in Albany to reduce those threats?
I am assuming we're talking about both drinking water and surface water. Okay, can I answer that in 2 minutes? Okay. Well, the biggest threat to our groundwater is that we continue to have more and more emerging contaminants that get into them. We're dealing with providing hundreds of millions of dollars so that our local water districts can basically provide new wells, filter wells, make sure it's safe. Sometimes wells have to be closed down. I'm also fighting very hard to get rid of the private water in my district, the American water system, where people are paying 6-7 times more. They've got to get onto public water so that they can also get the robust funding that we're giving to water. Yesterday, I attended an event where the Long Island Sound report card was unveiled. We need to clean up our harbors, our bays, our estuaries. Again, that's going to take major infrastructure money. We can get it from the federal government. That will help as well. Upgrading sewage treatment plants, expanding sewage treatment plants, individual septic systems. And something that I've been working with many of the local communities on is developing filtration systems for stormwater runoff. Whether it's a rain garden or it's some other filtration system, we've got to keep the nitrate, everything on our lawns, everything from our streets from going into our waterways.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. Councilman Smith.
Thank you. This big investment in stormwater runoff and infrastructure is going to be important. The expansion of our sewage treatment systems is also another one to ensure that clean harbors and bays. One of the things that I've been a champion of for the last several years is a anti-litter campaign, because I keep reminding everybody, anything you throw into on the side of the road litter-wise, eventually is going to get washed downstream into our harbors and bays. As far as groundwater, we are constantly looking to upgrade the filtration systems for our drinking water programs. In particular, the biggest threat right now is 1,4-dioxane that we've been challenged with in the water districts here in Huntington. But I would look to increase the funding for infrastructure and for storm drain, stormwater, and sewage treatment.
Thank you, Councilman Stitch. And for the next question, we'll begin with you. What would be your priorities to address climate change and its effect in the district, such as sea level rise, erosion, and flooding?
Well, the erosion flooding is going to happen at the waterfront. So I would be, as part of what I just answered, very supportive of infrastructure on the waterfront as far as bulkheading and stormwater, storm drains, et cetera, in order to preserve the waterfront. As far as at the local level, we can convert as much as possible to renewable energy, sustainable energy at our, what we have at our town level, and go towards, it's a small thing because I'm at the town level, it's very little, but things like converting over to electric power tools, et cetera, used in our general services, parks, use as many hybrid vehicles as possible, using our garbage trucks, for example, use compressed natural gas, things like that. That's what we can do at the local level.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. Senator Gaughran.
Okay, well, I think the answer, what we can do at the state level, because that is the office that we're running for here, is I believe to continue to make the progress that we have made with the Climate and Community Protection Act, which is, I believe, the strongest law in the United States dealing with climate change. It says that scientists, business leaders, environmentalists, experts, not politicians, through councils that are going to be set up, are going to pave the way so that by the year 2030, 2040, and 2050, those are benchmarks that we've set. We are going to be totally relying on renewable energy, wind, solar, electric vehicles. The law we pass now has to be implemented, and we have to find funding for it. And hopefully the federal government again will help us with funding. We've got a part of these councils are going to come up with some of the funding sources that we can come up with. But it actually has already worked because many fossil fuel companies are no longer investing in these old polluting technologies in New York State, because they know we're leading the way, we're making the change, and so you've already seen the impact, and I think the future is that we got to continue on that path.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. We'll begin with you for the next question. Do you support the NRA?
You know, I do support the Second Amendment and the right of people to safely have guns to protect themselves, their families, and for hunting. But I believe, you know, the NRA is an organization that has basically been developed to try to stop sensible gun laws from being passed. I am very supportive of all the legislation we passed, making sure that, again, I talked about the red flag law. We banned bump stocks in New York. We now require guns with the ammunition to be put in a locked box at someone's home, so that you know, if they have a young child in the house. The Senate passed. It hasn't passed the Assembly yet, but I'm hoping it will. A bill that is now going to stop people from making ghost guns, because you can go on the internet and buy all the parts for, you know, a semi-automatic weapon legally now. And that bill, by the way, is named in honor of Scott Beagle, who I never got to know, but I know his parents very well. They live in Dix Hills, and they have worked with me and the Governor Cuomo and many of my colleagues in making sure that New York has sensible laws to try to save lives. Not all these laws are going to do everything, but every law we have passed, I guarantee you, will and has saved lives.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. Councilman Smith.
Number one, I support the Second Amendment. I'm not a member of the NRA. I didn't fill out their questionnaire, so I think it's an organization I think it frankly has in many regards lost its way. But I think as far as sensible gun laws, I think the key lies in background checks for people that are purchasing them. As far as sensible gun laws go, you know, going full circle, right now, going back to bail reform, a lot of the crimes that people could be arrested for and immediately released relate to guns. If you're arrested with a gun at school, you'll be arrested and released. Bump stocks were just mentioned. If you're arrested with a bump stock, which effectively turns an assault rifle into a machine gun, if you're arrested with that, you'll be arraigned and immediately released. the ghost guns. If you're arrested for manufacturing a ghost gun, you'll be arraigned and immediately released. You won't be held over on any of these things. Scratching the serial numbers off of weapons, selling a gun to a minor. These are all crimes that are you'll be charged with and immediately released. So sensible gun laws are very important. Background checks are very important, but also if somebody violates the law and is charged with violating one of these laws, we have to have sensible laws as well that will hold these people to make sure that they're not back on the street before the kids are out of school that day.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. And Councilman Smith, we'll begin with you for this one. Is there a constituent that your office has helped that you're especially proud of?
Well, yes, most of them. Wow, that's a good one. I apologize, but I'm drawing a blank on that. So
our voters will stump you sometimes.
Yeah, that one's out of left field to come up with an individual. But you know, as far as issues, you know, one of my prouder moments was a 4-1 vote that I lost. I'd mentioned it earlier with the gateway giveaway. I think representing the town as a whole, you know, even taking a vote like that, it speaks to responsible government, not giving away the town's assets. It has to, you know, things like that have to be, just speak up when, even though you know you're going to lose the vote, speak up and speak your mind and let the chips fall where they may.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. Senator Gaughran?
Wow, a lot of constituents that we've helped with a lot of problems. Well, you know, I think I'd go back to my first week in the office. And one of the very first constituents I met, and I know he would not mind if I mentioned his name, is a gentleman by the name of Tim DeMaio. Tim DeMaio works for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. He was in charge of dealing with hazardous spills. It's like when airplanes crash into buildings and there's hazardous waste. He was on the Brooklyn Bridge going from Manhattan into Brooklyn, got a call. You know, he knew something happened, planes. Boss told him, go back there. This is going to be something. You know, you're going to at least have to deal with the fuel. Well, turned out he stayed there forever, working side by side with the hero, police officers, firefighters, EMTs, other first responders. And you know what? The state of New York did not give him and 800 other people the very same retirement benefits, early retirement for being sick, that all the other heroes got. And nobody could get it done. And so I consider that to be my proudest achievement in the Senate so far, because these 800 people now have some security. Many of them are very sick, and they want this protection for their families in case they are no longer here. Very proud to say that on last 9/11, the year before, Governor Cuomo signed my bill with Tim there and many other of these heroes.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. And the next one, we will begin with you. The question is, do you think the town of Huntington has been transparent in the multiple sexual harassment allegations against the supervisor?
Well, you know, I like the supervisor. I work very closely with him. And I think those are matters that have to work their way out in court. And I would hope that if there is anything serious, that the town board will be transparent about that at the proper time. However, there was one incident where there was an employee who was sexually harassing another employee, and not all the members of the town board. I believe my opponent was informed, the supervisor was informed, but not all the members of the town board were informed of this incident. And that's absolutely wrong. And that's why I actually introduced a law that, which I hope we can get passed, that is now going to make it mandatory that if there is credible accusation of sexual harassment in the workplace, all members of the town board have to be informed. Obviously, you want to protect people's rights. If it involves people on the board, there are some guardrails to it. But the members of the town board have to know if this type of activity is taking place. It's abhorrent. Not only is it abhorrent for the victims, but it often ends up costing the taxpayers lots of money if it's not properly discussed with the board and dealt with, and making sure you're protecting victims.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. Councilman Smith.
Yeah, I think that the appropriate amount of transparency has taken place. There are guidelines and programs in place that we have to follow, because we cannot simply take an allegation and publicize it without it first investigating. The incident that Senator Gaughran is referring to was immediately referred out to legal counsel to investigate. We followed the town's guidelines to the letter. And one of the things that we have to be very cautious of is the flip side of this, and that is when we wind up hearing rumors and chasing them. Okay, the town of Huntington, I can tell you, has spent tens of thousands of dollars so far this year chasing rumors, totally unsubstantiated rumors, because out of an abundance of caution, the rumor mill in town hall is legendary, and we have to chase down everything that we hear in order to make sure that there's no credibility to the allegation. But what winds up happening is we chase these rumors, we'll find out later on that there's absolutely no credibility to them, and people are going to wonder, why didn't we disclose it first? Well, because if you disclose it first and you find out later that it was just an unsubstantiated rumor, the people involved, they can't get their reputations back. People's lives are turned upside down. People's credibility is turned upside down. And there are procedures in place, okay, to protect not only the people that are subject to harassment, but people that are accused of it, and to make sure that they're not falsely accused of it. So do I think that the town handled it appropriately? Absolutely, I do.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. And you've been very generous with your time with me. I'm going to do 2 more questions, and then we'll move to closing statements. So Councilman Smith, we'll begin with you for this one. The question is, are you proud to be running with your party's presidential candidate?
Well, I'll let Donald Trump defend Donald Trump. I'm running for the state. I think many of his policies are laudable. I think the economy that he developed over the last 3 years up until coronavirus was second to none. I think many of his policies concerning foreign trade, the Iran nuclear deal, getting out of that disaster was laudable. I think the peace deal in the Middle East that was just recently announced is something that is truly deserving of recognition. But as far as his personality goes, I'll let him, defend his own personality. I'm very proud to be a Republican. I'm running on the independence line, the conservative line, the libertarian line. I'm proud of this. I'm proud to be a Republican, and I don't apologize for it.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. Senator Gaughran?
Well, I am very proud to be voting for Joe Biden because, quite frankly, this is the only time in my lifetime, and if you look back in history, maybe ever, because we've had some bad presidents in the past, where you actually have the President of the United States as a stated national policy wants to divide us based on race, on religion, on how much money you have. It is an absolute total disgrace. It's going to take a long time for us to get out of this. So I'm proudly supporting Joe Biden. And by the way, there's a very practical reason why every single New Yorker should be voting for Joe Biden. And that is, we want to get back our ability to deduct our state and local taxes. That's a $5,000 to $10,000 tax increase that most people in the 5th Senate districts have. We get that back. That will immediately be one of the biggest stimuluses that we're going to get. And quite frankly, he's made it clear that blue states, especially New York, he's going to go to court to try to stop us from getting our fair share of money, which again is all we want is to get some of the money that we have sent down to Washington for years. We have been a donor state to a lot of debtor states. We need help so that we can move forward.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. And the last question, we will begin with you, Senator Gaughran. Why should people alienated by the state of our politics vote for you?
Well, for one thing, I listen to everybody and talk to everybody, including, we talked about, the vaccination issue. I listen to any one of my constituents who disagree with me on that. Members of the NRA come into my office and we disagree on the votes that I've taken. And I also believe very strongly in terms of bipartisanship. I think, we have to set aside our political hats when we get elected into public office. Albany is too partisan a place. I granted that, and it's something I'd like to change. One of the first things I did when I got there was go and meet all my Republican colleagues, and I worked with some of them on legislation. Some of, many of them don't want to. They just want to do the political game, which is, unfortunately part of the situation that we have now. I am hoping with Joe Biden, we will go back to what we had in the 1980s. And that was a president named Ronald Reagan and a Speaker of the House named Tip O'Neill, who would back and forth have major policy disagreements. But you know what? They sat down together and said, we're going to lose Social Security for future generations. What can we do? And they worked out a compromise. So I want to bring everybody together and have civil discussions and agree to disagree.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. Councilman Smith.
Yeah, I think, working across the aisle is not a problem for me. I do it on a regular basis. I will say that my beloved bride is a Democrat, and she's a very staunch Democrat. So we've had some very spirited discussions over politics. But at the end of the day, you can agree to disagree, and you can disagree without being disagreeable. You have to leave it at that. The truth of the matter is that if Senator Gaughran and I, discussed issues, we would probably agree on 98% of them. And in fact, there's probably very little disagreement we would have. And the things that we disagreed about would probably be, how we would accomplish a goal, not necessarily the goal itself. So I'm not somebody who subscribes to the idea that, don't talk politics at the dinner table, or don't talk politics with your friends. Naturally I do all the time. Even people that I disagree with, it's, if you can have a rational discussion and not get too exercised about it, it's a healthy thing to do. And particularly, as referencing Tip O'Neill, all politics is local. I mean, the local races where the local races have the greatest impact on everybody's daily life. So the kitchen table issues are all here at the town level, at the state, town, and county level. And it's something that should be discussed more. I wish people would discuss it more, because there's a lot that, we talk about, people who don't even know what we're talking about.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. So now we will move to closing statements. And Senator Gaughran, you will be going first.
Okay. Well, again, I'd like to thank the League for this wonderful job. You pulled it off. And Councilman Smith, thank you for this important discussion this evening. I think I would disagree with you that, we agree on 98% of the issues, and maybe as we get through more of this campaign, we could hear more about some of your positions. But, clearly, when we talked about the issue of the environment, just having all our local governments being totally responsible for protecting our environment is not going to cut it. We need to work with our local governments, our county governments, and our state governments need to have strong policies, and maybe at some point we'll get a federal government that's going to recognize climate change. But climate change is a real problem, and we've got to deal with it. I also do strongly believe that the United States Supreme Court is going to look to upturn Roe v. Wade. Perhaps Senator Schumer and others will be successful. And I don't think they should be voting before the election. I do believe the next president should have this choice. But if that doesn't happen, we're facing in New York an erosion of our rights. Not only women's reproductive health rights, but they want to erode some of our voting rights. They want to erode some of our civil rights. And so we're going to have to be on the front line in New York to make sure that we're providing the protections. Again, Councilman Smith, I thank you very much. And to the voters of Nassau County, I've worked as hard as I can over the last 2 years. Again, the first year, we got a lot done. It moved fast. The second year, this COVID just smacked us around, and we're going to need to do a lot to move forward. But the most important thing I'm going to do, what I hope will be my second term, is to see how we can rebuild our state back, both economically, how we can rebuild the soul because of all the divisions that are going on, and how mostly we're going to help our kids to really excel in this state. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Gaughran. Councilman Smith.
Thank you. I'd first like to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this together. Thank you to Senator Gaughran for his participation. And I'd just like to say that, I look forward to representing the 5th Senate District in Albany. I'll be a strong voice in Albany. I'll always fight for public safety, public health, and public justice. Those are my 3 guiding stars for all policy issues. I think I'll bring a common sense voice to Albany. I will work with anybody that comes to the table with reasonable ideas. And I think New York's best days are ahead of us. I will work, first thing, criminal justice reform. I will reopen our economy, and I will bring term limits to the state of New York for every elected official. So I'd like to thank everybody for watching, and thanks to the League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. So thank you, candidates, for your considered answers and your closing remarks. It was a really wonderful evening tonight. Most importantly for our voters, please make a plan for voting. As a reminder, you may vote via absentee ballot at any Nassau County early voting poll site from Saturday, October 24th to Sunday, November 1st. I should include Suffolk County for our Suffolk County listeners. Or in person at your assigned polling location on Tuesday, November 3rd from 6 a.m. until 9 p.m. The League website, vote411.org, has pertinent voting information. Please check it out. And I'd like to thank both Councilman Smith and Senator Gaughran for participating this evening, the many League members who worked so hard to make this forum possible. A special thanks to Judy Esterquest, our technical guru, and Judy Jacobson, our League's esteemed voter services chair. Thank you all for actively participating in your community and taking the time to educate yourselves about the candidates. The forum is now ended, and I wish you all a good